Uh, Cal California Community of Practice on Secondary Transition. Thanks, Ray, for hitting record. Um, if you can, please put your name and affiliation in the chat feature. Okay, so once again, welcome to the meeting of CACOP, California Community Practice on Secondary Transition, and we've got an exciting lineup for today. And we're going to move into just real quick introductions. And my name is Randy Holcomb, and I'm an education programs consultant with the California Department of Education in the Special Education Division. And Ray, you want to go and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Ray Beakey. I'm here with the California Transition Alliance. I also do the Workability One State Advisory Chair.
All right. And then Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Caitlin Williams here. I'm one of the managers in the cooperative program section. I also have Diane Shinstock with me today, who is another manager in our cooperative program section. We are going to be co-facilitating it on the DOR side. And then I will pass it back to, is the next slide me as well? I feel like it is.
You ready for the agenda?
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I will be going through our agenda this afternoon. So we're going to do a review of the 2025-26 calendar. Today's presenters slash topic, we have connecting the dots, IEP, IPP, and IPE across agency conversation on supporting students. Our presenters for today are Heather DeFede with High Quality IEP, and Wes Roberson, who, as you all may know, is an education administrator for the Department of Developmental Services. From there, we'll go into open discussion, some partner updates, and then we'll have an opportunity to close. So, with that, we'll be passing it back to Ray, who I believe is going to be taking us through the calendar for the year.
Hi, thank you. Hi, thank you, Caitlin. We made it. We're at the home stretch. We're at our last meeting here, connecting the dots, IEP, IPP, and IPE. It would be the last general calendar meeting for this fiscal year, school year. And so we're looking forward to next year, where the leadership team will come out with a new agenda for next year and quarterly meetings as well. And so thank you for joining us. There's been so much interesting work and knowledge that's out there, and we look to finish strong with a really important and valuable conversation. Thank you.
All right, Ray. Thanks a lot. And so we're going to go and move into our topic for the day. And, so I'd like to introduce the presenters and Heather DeFede with High Quality IEPs and Wes Roberson, California Department of Developmental Services. He is an education administrator. And today's topic is connecting the dots, IEP, IPP, and IPE, a cross-agency conversation on supporting students. And so we're very excited once again to have these two stellar educators presenting to us. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Heather and Wes.
Thank you, Randy. We're so excited to be here and share this collaboration that has been in the works for a while between the Department of Developmental Services, the Department of Rehabilitation, and High Quality IEPs. So today we have actually three presenters. Wes Roberson will be presenting from the Department of Developmental Services. Sarah Candy and Megan Davis will be presenting from the Department of Rehabilitation. And I'm Heather DeFede, and I'll be presenting on behalf of High Quality IEPs. And we are super excited today to share out a resource with you all today. And this is the grand unveiling of this new resource. That is a side-by-side comparison of the IEP, the Individualized Education Program, the IPE, the Individual Plan for Employment, and the IPP. So we are really excited. We hope this will be helpful to all three agency partners as we are supporting our students and families and preparing for their life after post-secondary transition. And we had hoped to be able to do polls today, but it looks like that's disabled for this particular meeting. So I just want to have you take a moment and share in the chat, if you would, your knowledge of the plans from agencies other than your own, whether you have a strong understanding, moderate understanding, or limited understanding on plans that are from agencies from other agencies. So we're going to pause just for a moment for you to be able to rate yourself. Okay, moderate. That's really good. Okay, looks like most are moderate so far. Moderate to strong, great. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. So this is a great start to our presentation. And as we go through today, we will, some of the stuff, if it's from your own particular agency, may be like really introductory for you. But remember that we are supporting our agency friends across departments, and we are hopeful that we can all take something away today. So in the chat, I am dropping the link to the resource, which is posted on the High Quality IEP's website, along with a PowerPoint of the slides from today's training. So you should be able to access those. And our goal is that this resource really helps you not only expand your knowledge, but as you're working with families and students to understand all these different agencies that they have involved and help give you a tool to help support others to learn about the comparison and contrast between all of these different plans that our agencies have, and really with the final outcome of helping support our goal towards employment for all of our students. So you have the document, and we are going to get ready to dive right into our resource. And let's start. So if you've gotten a chance to open up the resource, you'll see that it moves from left to right in alphabetical order. So we start with the IEP, then we go into the IPE and the IPP. So as we present today, we're going to be going across that order. So let's start with the law. For education, our individualized education program is focused on, is based in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That is the federal law that supports our students with disabilities and puts all of the requirements in for us. So in special education through the IEP, we serve ages 3 through 22. And I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Heather. All right, so now let's take a look at the IPE, the Individualized Plan for Employment, and the laws behind it. The IPE is supported through state and federal regulations, and the Department of Rehabilitation's, or DOR's, role is to support Californians with disabilities in preparing for, getting, keeping, or advancing in a job. And one important thing to highlight, especially for students, is that they don't need an IEP to start receiving certain services. Students with disabilities can receive the 5 pre-employment transition services while they are potentially eligible. These include job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary education opportunities, workplace readiness training, and instruction in self-advocacy. If you ever want to dig more into the legal details for the IPE, the requirements live in Title IX of the California Code of Regulations, but the big picture is simple. This is the plan that drives a person's path towards employment and the services that support that journey.
Right. So let's jump into the IPP, or Individual Program Plan. The Department of Developmental Services is the state agency responsible for overseeing the coordination and provision of services and supports to over 500,000 Californians who have a qualifying disability or developmental delays. These services and supports are provided in accordance with the Lanterman Act, as well as the California Early Intervention Services Act, better known as Early Start. And those services are provided through the 21 regional centers. With Early Start, we also provide services through LEAs across the state as well for kiddos with solely low incidence disabilities. I'm going to periodically drop resources on all of these programs and laws into the chat. So I'll do that now, and I'll turn it back over to you, Heather.
Heather, you're muted.
It was splendid talk, let me tell you. So as we move through this resource, we want to just shine a light on the differences of the focus of each of these different plans. For example, an individualized education program, or that IEP, is really focused on their students' learning needs in the educational environment and focuses their supports and services on getting access to the general education curriculum in the school setting.
So on the focus of the IPE, the heart of the IPE is really about the employment goal for that individual. What does the person want to do? What are they good at? What interests them? The IPE helps build a pathway that matches their strengths and their abilities with a job that makes sense for them. You can think of it kind of like a roadmap, not just get a job, but here's the job that I want, and here are the steps and services that will help get me there.
So the individual program plan, or IPP, is a written document that the individual creates with their service coordinator at the regional center, as long as also with their planning team. So their planning team, which we'll get into a little bit later, but can include their VR counselor, or it can include their case carrier at their high school. It can also include family members, friends, or other members of the community. This document itself should be very much person-centered and have information about the individual that identifies what's currently happening in that person's life, what is important to them, a list of all of their goals and their future plans. The IPE will also include a list of services and supports that the individual and their planning team agree will help them in achieving those goals. Now, one big thing about the IPP meetings is they can happen as often as the individual needs or whenever goals change for that individual.
So looking ahead, how is a student or a young adult referred for each of these different plans? For an IEP, anyone can make a written referral to the local educational agency or school district or charter school for a special education evaluation. Before referring a student for a special education evaluation, that local educational agency is required to utilize as appropriate supports that are available in the general education program for all students. For children that are transitioning from Part C that Wes spoke about a few moments ago, which are our infants and toddlers at age 3, those early intervention providers typically make the referral unless a family chooses otherwise.
Thank you, Heather. So anyone who wants DOR employment services can get connected by reaching out to a local DOR office by phone, in person, or through a paper request, or by applying through an America's Job Centers of California, AJCC, one-stop center. And I will note that the online application is temporarily unavailable as it is undergoing maintenance to improve the user experience. However, the request for services form is available on our DOR website. So I'll go ahead and I'll drop that into the chat. And once someone starts the application, DOR will schedule an initial interview. And this provides an opportunity for our DOR team to get to know the person and their employment goals. And referrals don't just come from individuals, schools, regional centers, AJCCs, other community agencies, and families all make referrals too.
So similar to the other two plans, anyone can make a referral to the regional center. So this means educators, doctors, social workers, friends, parents, family members can make a referral to the regional center. One of the things that's important to know is that when an individual is referred to the regional center, they don't necessarily need a diagnosis of qualifying disability at the time of that initial referral. The regional center can assess the individual to determine if they have a qualifying disability once they've been referred to the regional center.
Okay. Each of these three plans has different timelines that affect them. For an IEP, once a referral is made, the district or local educational agency will develop an evaluation plan for the parent or the adult student to consider within 15 days of receiving the referral. And then within 60 days of that signed consent, excluding school breaks, the IEP team has to meet to review the assessment results, and if the individual is eligible, develop an IEP.
All right. So after someone submits their application to DOR for the IPE, DOR tries to meet with that individual for an initial interview within 2 weeks when possible. Now, officially, DOR has up to 60 days to determine eligibility, but it's really important to mention that it doesn't always take that long. Counselors can use existing information, counselor observation, and their professional judgment to make an expedited eligibility decision when appropriate. If additional information is needed, that's when the timeline might need an extension, and that only happens if everyone agrees to it. If someone is found eligible, the IPE itself needs to be created within 90 days after that eligibility determination. And again, that can be extended if needed, as long as the person and counselor agree.
So with respect to the IPP, once a referral is received, the regional center is to conduct an intake within 15 working days of receipt of that referral. If the intake team determines an assessment is needed, the assessment must be completed within 120 days of the intake or within 60 days if a delay of the assessment would pose a potential health or safety or developmental or placement risk to the individual. If the individual is found eligible, the IPP must be completed within 60 days.
So let's talk about consent. For an IEP, the parent must give written consent for an evaluation and for any services. This consent may include that they consent to all of the services within the IEP, some of the services within the IEP, or none of the services within the IEP. The district must implement any agreed upon parts of that IEP, even while there is a disagreement or any dispute resolution process ongoing.
The IPE is a joint effort. It's built with the person, not for them, right? So the IPE is developed collaboratively with the person and reflects their informed choices for the employment goal, the services, and who's providing those services. And services can begin once the person signs the IPE. If the person is a minor or has a conservator, consent is also required from parents, guardians, and or the conservators before services begin.
Regarding consent for the IPP, depending on the individual's age when signing the IPP, either the individual, the parent or legal guardian, or a conservator must approve and sign the IPP in order for services and supports identified within that IPP to begin. It is important to note that any disagreement with any part of the IPP may be noted within the document, and that a disagreement does not prevent the start of other services and supports identified by the IPP team within the IPP. Additionally, the regional center is to provide a written notice of appeal rights when there's a disagreement with parts of the IPP, or if the individual fully disagrees with the IPP itself. And I will put that resource in the chat now.
For eligibility purposes, each of the 3 agencies has their own eligibility criteria, although they might be used across agencies as supporting documentation. For local educational agencies, a student may be eligible for an IEP under Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act when they have one or more of the following disabilities, whether it's an intellectual disability, deafness, hard of hearing, speech language impairment, visual impairment, an emotional disability, orthopedic impairment, autism, a traumatic brain injury, a specific learning disability, deaf blindness, or other health impairment. And they need to meet not only the eligibility criteria, but they also have to have a need for special education services in addition to meeting that criteria. Oh, I skipped ahead a slide. So that eligibility and educational need are determined by the individual's IEP team, and it includes the parent, and when appropriate, the student is also involved.
All right, so eligibility for DOR services is pretty straightforward. A person needs to have a physical or mental impairment that creates a substantial barrier to employment. And they also need to require DOR services to help them prepare for, get, keep, or advance in a job. And there needs to be a reasonable expectation that DOR services will help them achieve employment. Counselors use information like medical or school records, observations, and sometimes details from families or other agencies to determine if a person is eligible for DOR services. Once someone is determined eligible, they will be assigned a priority for services category. During an active order of selection, the people with the most significant disabilities would be served first, and some folks who are eligible may be placed on a wait list if resources are limited.
All right, so first I'm going to talk about provisional eligibility, and then I'll go into Lanterman eligibility. So if a child is between ages 3 and under 5 years old and is deemed provisionally eligible, they are considered in the regional center system as status U if they have a disability that doesn't fall under the category of what's considered a solely low incidence functional limitation and have an impediment in at least 2 of the following major life areas. The first one is self-care, second is communication, third is learning, fourth is mobility, or the fifth is self-direction. Note, if an individual does not need a qualifying developmental disability to qualify as provisionally eligible, however, there are nuances to this. The individual must be reassessed at least 90 days before turning the age 5. If they do not meet the criteria for Lanterman eligibility at that time, services from the regional center will end when the individual turns 5. Next slide, please. So regarding Lanterman eligibility applies to individuals of any age who have a qualifying developmental disability, for example, autism, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, intellectual disability, or any other condition closely related to an intellectual disability or requiring similar treatment. Note, when an individual is under the age of 3 and is determined eligible for a Lanterman, their plan at that time is called an IFSP, or Individual Family Service Plan, not called an IPP at that time. Once they turn age 3, that plan then transitions to being called an IPP. If determined eligible for Lanterman, the following criteria must be met. The condition must have begun before the age of 18 years old and is expected to continue throughout the individual's lifetime. The condition causes substantial limitations in at least 3 areas of major life activity. So before I mentioned self-care, communication, learning, mobility, self-direction, independent living, or economic self-sufficiency. Next slide.
Okay. So we've been talking about these different plans. And so what is in each of these plans? For the IEP, the Individualized Education Program, this is an education-based program or plan that is designed to support the students' learning and their progress. It will go through and list their present levels, including their strengths, interests, preferences, needs, and it establishes goals based on those areas of need for the student. And then based on those goals, services and supports are developed to help the student access the general education curriculum. This IEP is developed collaboratively with required team members to make sure that the student receives a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment and allows them to make meaningful educational benefit.
You're muted,
You're on
Megan.
mute.
Thank you. Much appreciated. So as Heather shared, let's talk about what actually goes into the IPE in that plan. First is the employment goal. That's the North Star. Next is the services and supports needed to reach that goal, who's providing those services, and the timeline for when everything will start. It also spells out how progress will be measured and what both DOR and the individual are responsible for. All right, and much like the IEP, the IPE is built collaboratively, right? And it's based on the person's unique strengths, abilities, and interests. And for students in school, DOR has to consider the IEP or the 504 plan. Services should be aligned so the IPE doesn't live in isolation. It's intentionally coordinated with what's already happening in the student's education plan.
So regional centers now use a statewide standardized IPP template. The template includes sections on the individual's vision for the future, decision-making, various areas of their life, communication, and an emergency plan. The IPP also includes the agreement and signature page. It's important to note that the IPP specifies the goals that matter most to that individual and the services and supports that the individual will receive, who will pay for them, when they will be provided, and the different service providers, for example, whether that's DOR or if it's services that may be provided by the regional center or school, those are identified in the IPP. The IPP also identifies the frequency of services and supports, meaning when they will begin and when they will end, so that the individual can achieve their goals. I will drop more information about the IPP template here in the chat.
So within each of these 3 plans, there are services that are provided to the individual. Within the IEP, those services are documented in the IEP and they are provided directly to the student to support their progress towards the agreed upon goals and helping them meaningfully participate. There are also indirect services that are supplementary supports. They might be accommodations or modifications, and these also are included in the IEP.
So, as Megan mentioned, all of the services that a consumer might need to achieve their employment goal under the individual plan for employment would be outlined within their IPE. And the services under the IPE are all about helping someone prepare for and achieve their employment goal. So there's a whole array of services, but some examples include vocational counseling and guidance, career exploration, training or education programs, job readiness coaching, assistive technology, supported employment services, and many more. Next slide. And these services don't happen in just one location. They can take place at community training sites, workplaces, colleges, DOR offices, anywhere that supports the person's employment path.
All right, so services included in the IPP are those that are covered by the regional center and they're described in their service guidelines. Some example regional center services may include, but are not limited to, adult day centers, behavioral management services, employment programs, early start therapeutic services, home and health supports, etc. Per state law, regional centers are considered what's called a payer of last resort. This means that the regional center cannot pay for services for which another agency has a responsibility to do so. Regional center service coordinators help individuals and their families maximize generic resources before the regional center can fund a service. Essentially, generic resources are services that are already provided by other agencies who have a legal responsibility to do so. Note, services and supports are driven by the IPP team and are individualized. I have a resource here I'm going to drop in the chat that provides more information on regional center services.
Okay, we had hoped to do a Zoom poll, but if you could drop in the chat, what are some things that you see that all three plans have in common? Do you think they have person-centeredness in common, the requirement of consent, or involve collaboration, or all three? Okay, you guys are an advanced group, that's for sure. That is right. They all three are centered around either student-centered or person-centered planning. You'll hear those common language between all three plans. All three plans require consent to be implemented, and they all are team-based and involve collaboration. All righty, here we go. So service location, we've already kind of alluded to it a bit when we were talking about the different services that are provided. Within the IEP, both state and federal law require that the student with the IEP receive their education and services in the general education classroom along non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible. And we know that for our students who are deaf or hard of hearing or are deafblind in California, we have additional considerations to consider their mode of communication and access to like mode communication peers. A student's education is provided outside of that general education environment only when their needs are so significant and cannot be met with supplementary aids or services in the general education environment. Again, with the exception of students within our deaf community.
So this slide really enforces what we talked about in the past section. The IPE services can happen in a lot of different places. The location depends entirely on the person's goal and what they need. So it's really flexible, and the environment is whatever best helps the individual move toward employment. There's some goals or some examples listed on this slide, such as community training sites, workplaces, colleges or training programs, DOR offices, and any other setting depending on the services that they are receiving.
The IPP process is not a one-size-fits-all process. Services are coordinated based on the individual's unique needs and circumstances, which influence where services are provided. Services are to be delivered in a least restrictive setting. This is specific to the individual, and it may include environments such as their home, community, or other environments that best support the individual's goals. Locations where services and supports are provided may vary as a direct result. Note, supports are to be delivered, and I already mentioned this, the least restrictive setting, and we did talk about it could be an individual's home, but it also may be out somewhere in the community. It could be at a potential like social rec location. So there's a lot of opportunities in where services can be provided. Next slide.
Okay, so who's providing these services in all these different locations? It varies a little bit between each plan. Within the IEP, the district is responsible for providing the IEP services. However, the district can contract with a variety of non-public schools or non-public agencies to provide those services. But the vast majority are a school district that is providing the services.
So I think we have a slight error on this slide. It doesn't match the information on the document. But I'll talk a little bit about the provider, and you can refer to the document that Heather sent the links for. So who actually provides the services in an IPE? DOR counselors provide some services directly, especially things like counseling and guidance. DOR also works with a whole network of partners, and the providers can look a little different depending on the person's employment goal and the types of services they need. Service providers may include schools, community rehabilitation programs, county mental health, and other approved vendors. They're often provided through fee-for-service authorizations to vendors and co-op contracts. And the key point is that DOR coordinates with a broad range of partners to make sure individuals get the right services in the right setting.
The regional centers are independent network of community-based nonprofit organizations that have contracted with the Department of Developmental Services to connect individuals with developmental disabilities and their families to the services and supports that they need. Regional centers are guided by locally based independent boards of directors that are responsible for oversight and guidance of how those centers bring the promise of the Lanterman Act to life. Regional centers collaboratively work on shared opportunities, challenges, and needs through the Association of Regional Center Agencies, also known as ARCA. The 21 regional centers play a crucial role in supporting individuals with developmental disabilities in California by providing essential services and resources tailored to meet their needs. As mentioned earlier, regional centers provide assessment, determine eligibility for services, offer case management services as well. Regional centers also develop, purchase, and coordinate the services in each person's individual program plan, or IPP. Next slide, please. Service and supports in the IPP are purchased by the regional center and are provided by vendors, also known as service providers. In some circumstances, a vendor may be the same nonprofit organization that the DOR may use for employment services. But regional center, because of the scope of services that they can provide, the type of vendors we have varies greatly based on geographical location and the needs of individuals served by that regional center. Vendors provide specific services that help individuals work towards their goals. Vendors go through a formal approval process as well. And when the regional center purchases services from a vendor, they are responsible for understanding the person's unique needs and to support them in achieving their goals through their IPP.
So moving on to the annual timelines for each of these plans. The IEP is reviewed each year, and the timeline is within 365 days. Some of the other plans may just be by the 12th month, but within IEPs, it's 365 days to the day. Parents are required to receive updates on their child's progress towards their IEP goals at least as often as the school provides regular progress reports, such as progress report time. So if a report cards are given twice a year, then the progress towards IEP goals would be given twice a year. If it's done on a quarterly basis for report cards, then their progress towards goals will also be on a quarterly basis.
So similarly, the IPE also has an annual check-in. Each year, the counselor and the individual go through the plan together, review progress, and decide if anything needs to be updated based on new goals or circumstances.
So similar to the other plan timelines mentioned by my colleagues, the needs and services within the IPP are to be reviewed by the IPP team annually. Note, the IPP may span over multiple years based on the planning team's decision. So that can be a 1, 2, or 3 year IPP. Just it's based on the decision of that team.
Okay, so let's talk about the calendaring of between all of the different plans. The IEP, the calendar year, for example, for the IEP is 180 instructional days. The preschool schedules may vary, but for school districts, it's 180 instructional days. Some preschools and kindergarten hours may vary, but typically they follow the school calendar. There are, for students whose needs are so significant that they will regress and be unable to recoup those skills in a reasonable amount of time, there is an option for an extended school year, and those are determined on an individual basis, and it's considered each time the child's annual IEP is developed.
So the calendar for the IPE is pretty simple. DOR services can happen year-round. Everything depends on the services that are written into the IPE and what the person needs to move towards their employment goal.
Regional centers operate year-round. They're open throughout the entire year, and regional center funded services are based on the individual's need. So it really just depends on that person, and it's specific to what their needs are and when the services are provided within that annual year. All right.
Okay, so each of these plans also deal with transition. And for an IEP, they end when a student earns a regular high school diploma or ages out at age 22. So transition planning or planning for life after high school is part of the IEP, which is called the Individual Transition Plan or ITP. This typically happens by age 16. However, in California, the law is that the IEP team can consider any transition services or planning as the student is entering high school. And this ITP supports the student's goals for education, employment, and independent living when appropriate.
Students can begin receiving pre-employment transition services or PREETs, also known in California as DOR student services, while they're still in high school. These services help with exploring careers, building skills, and getting ready for work. Megan mentioned them on an earlier slide. Students can receive PREETs through age 22 if they're in a post-secondary program. And as they approach graduation or exit from special education, DOR can work with the student, the school, and the family to create an IPE that supports the transition into employment. Next slide. Once the person reaches stable employment for at least 90 days as part of their IPE, DOR can close the record of services. But that doesn't have to mean that the door is closed forever. If an individual decides that they need services again later on, they can always reapply for DOR services at any point.
Once an individual with a developmental disability has been determined eligible for regional center services under the Lanterman Act, they will receive services for the rest of their life from the regional center. However, for some reason, it was found that the eligibility determination was made erroneously, the individual may no longer receive services from that regional center. For individuals who are provisionally eligible, the regional center must reassess them at least 90 days before their 5th birthday to determine if they qualify under the Lanterman Act. And as mentioned earlier, if it is found that they do not qualify, regional center services end at age 5 for those individuals receiving services through provisional eligibility.
Okay, so we talked a lot about the collaboration that happens on each of these different plans. And so each plan has different rules of who those team members are that are collaborating. For an IEP, it is required that the IEP include parents, which is the California Education Code of Parents, which includes guardians or adults that have educational rights for a student. The general education teacher is required along with the parent, special education teacher or provider, the school representative that has the ability or authority to allocate resources, sometimes called the administrative designee or the LEA rep, and the student, wherever appropriate, and especially as they are coming into transition age and considering their post-school outcomes. And the whole reason we're here today, another required member of the IEP team is when a student is transitioning at age 16 and higher, an agency representative who's responsible for providing any of those transition services should be at the IEP meeting whenever appropriate.
So the core of the IPE team is always the individual consumer and the DOR counselor, but others can be involved too. As listed on this slide, family members, trusted supporters, school staff, regional center staff, and any service providers who've been authorized to provide services as outlined in the IPE. Really, anyone the individual wants to include, we make sure that it's very person-centered.
Similar to the IPE, the IPP has the individual as the central focus of that planning team. And very much like all the other plans we've mentioned, the individual can choose to have pretty much anyone they want as a part of that planning team. They can have, if they're a minor, they're going to have their parent guardian there at that meeting. If they have a conservator, their conservator will be a part of that meeting. Friends, teachers, service providers, healthcare professionals, VR counselor, could be friends, a coach, really anyone that they feel should be a part of that planning team meeting can participate in that meeting. And with that, we'll move on to the next slide.
So with all these team members, who is the main point of contact for the families and or student? Within the IEP, the primary contact point is typically the case manager, which is typically the person that provides the most amount of services for that student.
This is a quick one. The DOR counselor is the main point of contact for questions about the IPE or services. They're the go-to person.
And at the regional center, it's the individual service coordinator who is the primary point of contact.
So that's just an example. Even though those were a quick slide, we have 3 different titles of things that families and people that families are trying to navigate through. So for procedural safeguards for each of these different plans, there are different rules and protections that apply in those specific plans. So for the IEP, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the parents have specific rights that are tied to their participation in the plan, the evaluation process, the notifications that they are required to receive from the school district. And they also have the right to access records and dispute resolution. We do have additional resources in the parental rights documentation that you can visit more to get more information.
All right. And people receiving DOR services have important rights and protections as well. So individuals have rights related to participation, informed choice, confidentiality, access to records, and resolving disagreements, including dispute resolutions. Information on these rights and remedies are provided through DOR, and I'll go ahead and I'll drop them in the chat here as well.
Right. Individuals' rights are outlined in the Lanterman Act. An individual served by the regional center or any representative acting on their behalf um, believes that the individual's rights have been unfairly denied by the regional center, state-operated facility, or service provider can file a complaint. And I will drop that infographic flowchart on that process, and it'll provide more information on how to navigate that.
Thanks, Wes. And as we come to the conclusion of our presentation, the final section is all about the money. So let's talk about the funding cost. For an IEP, the local educational agency is the one that is required to provide all of those special education evaluations and services, and they are all free of charge to families. And that is the foundation of what is referred to of free, appropriate public education.
Many services under the IPE are provided at no cost to the individual, and DOR collaborates with the person to discuss and determine who will pay for services. DOR also explores comparable services and benefits with the person. This would be things like FAFSA, or also known as the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, regional center services, AJCC resources, county mental health, and more, to identify and utilize existing resources that may be able to support the services the person needs to achieve their employment goal. It's a collaborative conversation, and the goal is to always make sure the person gets the services they need without unnecessary barriers.
And once an individual is determined eligible under the Lanterman Act, services and supports are free regardless of age or income.
Well, we really thank you all for hanging with us through this whole presentation. So just as we've shared 3 different types of plans and their similarities and differences, and the resource that we have shared with you in the chat and that is posted on the High Quality IEP's website, let's think about how we can use this as part of your process with whichever agency you're representing. When could you share this resource with students or clients and their families? And how might you introduce this resource? So if anybody's brave to share in the chat, where within your process that you could include it and share it, and then how might you introduce this? Okay, great. During transition fairs, that would be a perfect opportunity to share this. Thanks, Lakeisha. And during intake or orientation meetings, great. During an IEP meeting, great. Thank you, Rebecca. At transition planning meetings. Oh, on your Facebook page, we'd love that. Thank you. During program presentations. These are all great ideas of how we can help support our families and our students and young adults as they're accessing services from a variety of agencies. Great middle school and high school case managers, exactly, especially as middle schools are now introduced to transition because of AB 438, where we should consider transition services. And Christina will get you the slide deck. It's in PDF, so we will get that. But there was one of DOR's slides we need to fix first. So we'll also redo that one slide and fix that as well. Okay, all the new AB 438 teachers, exactly. So we're so glad that you found ways that this might be a useful resource for you to use, whether you're in a school or in a partner with at the IEP meeting with as a representative from the Department of Rehabilitation or through regional centers throughout the state. So thank you so much. And I will stop sharing and turn it back over to Randy and Ray.
All right. Thank you, Heather and Wes and everybody else that participated in this presentation. And now we're going to move to the section if there's questions. Ray, I don't know if you're able to scan and see what questions we might have.
Yes, sir. I will look to see if there are some questions through the chat.
Awesome.
I was monitoring it, but I will double check again.
And here's one here who wants to know, this person wants to know if the slide deck will be made available.
I think we got to do one adjustment to a slide, and then I think Heather's mentioned that she'd be able to provide that to the group.
Okay.
I know, Jennifer, I think you put it in the chat. Do you want to read, in case some folks did join us late, the link to that document, the PDF document? I know you did it a few times, but maybe one more time. Yeah, I don't see any questions, Randy, that weren't answered. Thank you, Jennifer.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and move into our partner updates. Our first partner that is going to share some updates will be CATA and Mr. Ray Beakey.
Thank you, Randy. Oh, is there another slide?
There's that one.
It's a little different. I'll just share I'll put the slide deck because I did update it. Let me slideshow from the beginning, and I'll just share because there's a QR code on the slide deck that I have.
Okay.
It's not going to be perfect, but we'll work through it. Share. It's on a different screen. Let me see. Slideshow from current slide. So, Kata, thank you. Ray Beakey, California Transition Alliance. Thank you, Randy. What a great presentation. I know, getting all these acronyms and out there, and you guys did it really seamlessly and understandable because there is definitely a huge audience. So I appreciate you all. The slide deck for us, the California Transition Alliance update. We have some exciting news. There's some resources there as well. We've heard a bunch of great resources, but there's a link within the PowerPoint or the QR code there. We're updating our resources can be found to support families and self-advocates, and there's quite a menu for the range of students that are being implemented or affected with transition planning. And so please check those out as we look to update and get better links or more links for in that as well. It is also really important to know, I saw a bunch of our workability folks out there, is we're looking to do a training in fall of 2026, which will be a virtual training, as we are looking to update the basics guidebook. And so we're updating that and taking a look at that and going to implement a train the trainers and some fall training. That will be virtual as well to look at the basics guidebook, which I know still is such a great tool to start from that transition process. And as this training today is going to be so instrumental for those, if you span the knowledge base of teachers out there that are implementing and understanding what transition is. We also wanted to share that we are in the very early stages of planning a Bridge to the Future 7, right? So this year, if we all recall, in October, we were in Sacramento and got, close to 600 people in the room to do quite a few breakouts. I think we had 35 breakouts. And so we are starting that process for fall, October-ish of 2027. And the early conversations there are related to being in Southern California someplace. So stay tuned for that. And for all of us planning purposes, it's really important to start thinking about that. For our workability folks who are in the end of the year reporting stages right now, we should have that information before we do the end of the year budget, so we can know where to travel, how much that's going to cost, and put that into our final budgets for the fiscal year. So that's really exciting news, just getting Bridges back into a 2-year rotation. The next update here is, again, we're always looking to recruit. We did restructure our regions there. They now are completely aligned with Workability One's regions, right? So there's 5 regions. You can see the nice color coding there that also represent Workability One regions. We're always looking for region leads, so please, if you are interested in becoming a region lead, and we have spent a lot of time discussing as a leadership team and also as a broader group with the Transition Alliance, how we can best serve, because even with Workability, those regions are so vast on how we can find out what's in your areas and how to best serve your areas and get out there and push that information out. I know the big one that we think about is Transition Resource Fair season, which we are sort of entering and ending in a sense as we end up the year. If you do want to be a member of CATA, please log in. We're always looking for new membership as a space to connect. Again, similar to this group here, but connect to learn more about that boots on the ground. How do you implement and actively engage with those community partners that we heard about? And CATA has a space to do that, California Transition Alliance. Those are my 2 slides, Randy. I will stop so you can get back on your slide deck. And I appreciate the time. Thank you all.
Okay, well, hi everyone, Diane Shinstock with the Department of Rehabilitation. With the most relevant update for you all from our department, we have previously shared this, but we'll reiterate it again today, and that is that in January of 2026, the Department of Rehabilitation announced its intention to implement a process called Order of Selection for new applicants. The department is still in the process of obtaining the necessary approvals for implementing this process. If the information is new to you, under Order of Selection, new eligible applicants may be placed on a waiting list before they can receive vocational rehabilitation services. We did hold 2 public meetings in both December and January. Public comment was solicited and welcomed and considered. The next slide. For those of you, again, unfamiliar with Order of Selection, it's a federally mandated process that VR agencies must implement when they do not have sufficient resources, and that could be staff or funding in order to serve all eligible individuals. Under Order of Selection, individuals with the most significant disabilities are given priority access to VR services. And this is a process that we will continue to provide high quality individualized services to those who need them most, even during times of limited capacity. There is an eligibility determination for all applicants, regardless of Order of Selection, and that will continue to be, applicants will be continued to be evaluated for VR eligibility. And then eligible individuals will be placed in one of 3 categories based upon the severity of their disability. Next slide. Some important reminders, and that is that consumers who already have an approved IPE, which you just heard about, I can use the acronym, will continue to receive services. The Order of Selection does not interrupt, nor does it change the services that they're already receiving if they're active in their plan. It does not impact DOR student services. Those services continue to be available and open to all potentially eligible students. If there are students who receive student services and have applied for VR services after Order of Selection is implemented, they may continue to receive those DOR student services while their eligibility for VR services is determined and whether or not they would be placed on that wait list. The next slide. If you have comments or questions, you can email the department, and then there's some additional information on our website, and I will drop that into the chat. And that is all from the Department of Rehabilitation.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Diane. And I'm going to jump into some CDE updates. And the first one that I want to talk about is the Constituent Support Office. The Constituent Support Office dedicates itself to enhancing communications and support for families throughout California. The Constituent Support Office will provide immediate support to families while accessing the escalation process. And you can contact the Constituent Support Office via phone, email, or you can use the QR code that is on the slide that is provided for you. And the next one I want to talk about is the Strengthening Partnerships for Students with Disabilities webinar series. This webinar series has been occurring throughout the school year, I guess you could say, and there's one more at the end of this month. And the CD is in partnership with the Seeds of Partnership project and wants to encourage you to attend this webinar series. This is a fantastic webinar with topics that include strategies for effective communication, ways to strengthen the family-school relationship, and best practices, as well as a host of other topics. And you can scan that QR code for more information. And then the next update from CDE centers around the Family Empowerment Centers on Disability, or otherwise known as the FECs. The Family Empowerment Centers on Disability provide services to families with children and young adults ages 3 to 22. The FECs provide information, resources, and referrals to better equip families with children and young adults with disabilities to navigate the vast landscape of resources and services that are provided for them. The services provided are based on regional community needs, and for more information, you can scan that QR code. And lastly, if you have any recommendations for potential topics and presenters, this is our last general meeting of the fiscal year, but the leadership team will be meeting to take a look at any potential topics and contact presenters for that. So if you have any ideas, please email myself. My name is Randy Holcomb, and there's my email, or Caitlin Williams at the Department of Rehabilitation, or you can send it to the CACOP inbox, and those email addresses are located on the slide for you. And at this time, I want to go ahead and thank all of you for joining us, and as well as the presenters. They did a fantastic job. And I want to thank our partners, CATA and the Department of Rehabilitation. We will see you next fiscal year, and we will be coming out or sending out a calendar of upcoming general meetings and topics probably this early summer. So thank you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.